Hi, Rich Leiter here. Welcome to the Naked Booktuber. Okay, I'm going to try to do a review of The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I just finished reading. This book was written I don't know anything about Donna Tartt. I just happened to stumble across her by chance. I was reading some blurb about Nietzsche on YouTube, and in this particular blurb there was a reference made to a Donna Tartt in The Secret History. So I was interested in it, and then I found the book online and I read it. It was written in the 90s, the early 90s, this book. It's about 570 pages long. Donna Tartt has something of a cult following, I understand. Her book, The Secret History, has been translated into 30 languages already. She has some kind of a superstar literary agent, or did have it. She has Donna Tartt groupies, fans, who say that she is the genius, and they've read her novels 17 times, each one of them, and Donna, I love you, and you're wonderful, and you've changed my life, and all this stuff. So I decided to read the thing, and that's my background of this book. Donna Tartt, I understand, also went to Bennington College, and where she, I think she majored in the classical languages, in Greek, and apparently this book, The Secret History, has to do is a lot of it stems from her experiences in Bennington, and of course it's done in a fictional way. I've read this anyway. So, should I give you the plot of this book? This book is really a book full of spoilers. I'm going to just give you all the spoilers, the whole thing. I mean, I'm really basically doing this book review for people who have already read the book. If you want to know what the plot is, you can just look it up on Wikipedia. Look up the Secret History. Although I'll try to give it to you. It's a very simple plot, but at the same time, it's a very complicated plot. Basically, it's about a group of five kids, 20-year-olds more or less, who go to this school. This fictional school in Vermont, where they major in the classics, and they have this very charismatic teacher, Julian, who and he kind of has a great deal of influence on them. They hang on his every word, more or less. One member of the group, and all of these kids are pretty much well-to-do kids. Except for one, who is the narrator of the book, and the book is told in the first person by a guy named Richard. And Richard comes from very humble origins in California. His parents are nauseating to him, and he wants to escape them and escape his extremely soul-crushing humble origins in California. And he finds a way, and he goes to school in California, college for 1 year, but then he finds a way of transferring with financial aid to this more exclusive school in Vermont. So he's the newcomer to the group. He's the poor boy in the group. And he basically talks about all of the members of the group. He's very much of a thinker and introspective person. He ruminates a lot. There's a lot of interior monologue shot throughout the whole book. And here's the guts of it. What happens is, at one point in the book, kind of early on in the first part of it, the group as a whole, being Greek students of Greek literature, want to try to try to understand the Greek mentality of thousands of years ago, the whole Dionysian bacchanal experience, where the Greeks or these Greek cults were kind of lost themselves in some kind of an orgiastic frenzy. They lost their own sense of self and merged into some kind of a higher consciousness, a bacchanal, a Dionysian bacchanal. And the members of this little clique or group, they want to try to duplicate this experience. They take drugs and they fast, and they want to get into a state of mind where they can duplicate this bacchanalian experience. And they do, apparently. One night, they'd go out every weekend in the woods, trying to get in touch with their Dionysian selves, I guess you'd call it. And at one point, when they finally achieve this transcendental Greek state that they're so enamored with. Well, they end up by killing somebody. They end up by killing a Vermont farmer whose property they happen to be wandering on while they're going through their hallucinatory rituals. They kill the guy by mistake. They don't even remember much about how it happens. It's so patchy. Each of the group members has a different recollection of it. And so from this point in the story, the novel, the tone, the whole novel kind of shifts. So from this point on in the story, all 5 members of the group are trying to make sure that they are not charged with murder, that they cover their tracks, that nobody knows that they were in the woods, that there's no connection between them and this Vermont farmer who lived a couple of miles away from the campus. So that's kind of the plot of the book after the first, 150 pages or so. It's kind of like almost like you've seen many movies of this type where somebody kills somebody. Maybe he kills him accidentally, or she kills somebody accidentally, or maybe it's on purpose. And the rest of the movie is about covering your tracks so that you're not caught. Like double indemnity comes to mind. And the more you try to cover your tracks, the more complicated it becomes, and the more paranoid you become. It's something like that. And the novel just progresses from that point on. So it becomes that's kind of the plot of the novel. Now I felt 2 things. So there are 2 ways of looking at this novel by Donna Tartt, The Secret History. There are 2 levels of reading and interpreting and thinking about this book. On the first level, a more superficial level, one asks oneself, is this a well-written book? Is it a book worthy of one's attention? It is 570 pages long, more or less. It does require something of a commitment. Is this a well-written book? Is this just a piece of crap? No, this is not just a piece of crap. This is a very, very, very well-written, good book, worthy of anyone's attention. The woman who wrote it, Donna Tartt, is obviously an extremely talented person. She's a real wordsmith. She knows what she's doing. It took her 10 years. She says it takes her 10 years to write her novels. I think she's written 3 of them. So you have to give respect to a person that devotes 10 years of their life to writing a novel. And it shows in the writing of this book. There's great craft in this novel. There's great thought in this novel. There's a lot to digest in this novel. So for me to just tear this novel down or criticize it would be stupid and would make me look bad. It's a very, very well-written book, and at certain points in the book, I was quite envious of Donna Tartt's obvious talent. Okay? Now let's go to the second level of reviewing, slightly deeper level. Even though this book is obviously an extremely well-written book, I have a lot of problems with it. But again, you have to put these problems in context. It's a good book, okay? It's a very good book. So now that I've said that, this is the hard part, because with Donna Tartt, the qualities which make her writing so good can at times also be the same qualities which make it not so good for me. This is just me, okay? Some people will obviously disagree with me and think I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. This is purely a matter of taste. So let's go over some of the pitfalls or problems that I had with this novel, with this very, very good novel. I guess the first and the biggest problem I had with this novel is this. When I began reading this thing and I began listening to the main character, a 20-year-old person, talk, I had high hopes for this novel. The interior monologue, the perceptions which this young fellow has, his sensitivity, the way in which language is used and descriptions. I was thinking, maybe I've stumbled across another Saul Bellow. Maybe I've stumbled across another Humboldt's Gift. Because it was a very, very, up to the murder, it was basically a very, very non-plot driven novel. It was a very internal novel. It was about the ruminating of this main character. And I love that. I love novels where nothing really happens. Those are the best kind of novels because they're not really commercial novels. I love novels like Humboldt's Gift. We're really, it's the whole novel is not so much plot driven as it is driven by the brilliant, scintillating thoughts of the main character and the language, the way the language is expressed. I like that. I like Bukowski for the simple reason that there's really no plot to any of his novels. I like Vladimir Nabokov. I like Lolita a lot. Because in a sense, there's so much rumination going on. It's not really about plot. There is plot, of course, but it's not so heavily. It's not all plot. It's just such a cerebral novel. I love that. I love Witold Gombrowicz. His novels are all internal. There's no commercial plot to speak of. So I love that, and I thought, I found something. But then the novel kind of deteriorated for me, strangely enough. It was still good all the way through. But once the murder took place, this bacchanal experience that these boys had, and not just boys, there was a woman involved too. There was a clique of, I think, 5 or 6 of them. Once this bacchanal took place and this Vermont farmer was accidentally murdered by one of them in some kind of hallucinatory trance. Once this happened, the novel shifted from being an internal novel, a novel of rumination, a novel of just exploring the self. It shifted into more of like I say, like a commercial movie type thing, where they're trying desperately, all these characters, to cover their tracks and not be incriminated and go to jail. And then this plot, so it becomes more plot driven. And then the plot, I have to tell you, because I said there will be spoilers, after this farmer is accidentally killed by the group, there's one member of the group who didn't take part in this bacchanal. So he actually was not responsible for killing this farmer. But he suspects what the others in the group had done. And this character, his name is Bunny, is kind of a very immature, but at the same time very clever, spoiled brat. And he resents the fact that he was excluded. He has a lot of feelings about the other members of the group. He ends up by being paranoid. He ends up by talking a lot about. This murder appears in the Vermont newspapers, and the other members of the group become more and more anxious and worried that maybe Bunny knows what happened, and that Bunny is going to talk to somebody about what he suspects has happened, and that the other group members will be incriminated and will ultimately go to jail for murder. And Bunny becomes more and more, Bunny begins to decompensate more and more, and he begins to be more careless about his remarks to strangers. And it puts the rest of the group in great danger of being suspected of murder. And in the end, one of the group members, I guess the leader of the group, says, "We got to kill Bunny to shut him up. I mean, this is a wild card who's out of control." And they do. They kill him. So the first murder in this novel was accidental of the Vermont farmer. But the second murder of their classmate Bunny, just to shut him up, is not accidental. It was a real murder in which all of the other members participated. And so now the plot of the novel becomes even more convoluted. Now not only is everybody trying to avoid being incriminated for the original murder of the Vermont farmer, but now they're afraid of being incriminated for the murder of Bunny, for what happened to Bunny. Nobody knows it was a murder, but they're all paranoid that everyone is going to connect the dots and understand that they murdered Bunny. I mean, it becomes a big media frenzy about the murder of this college student Bunny, and FBI comes on the scene and all sorts of things. So the point I'm making is that once these murders are committed in the novel becomes more plot-driven. It becomes more of an external novel than internal. It loses its status as a potentially great work of literature for me, and it becomes more of a very interesting yarn, something you might read on the beach during the summertime. That is the biggest problem I have with this book. It becomes like in Double Indemnity, the movie, as the plot, as the suspicion, as all the characters in this book, the clique, become more and more paranoid about being caught for what they've done. It becomes more and more like a soap opera, and less like a work of literature. When I read Humboldt's Gift, even though there were many characters in it and there was a plot, I did not get the sense that it was a soap opera. In a way, this book is kind of like a very, very sophisticated, elegant soap opera. The longer you go on with the book, as you go on with the book, she delves into the characters of each of the members of the group. You learn that one member of there are some twins in the group, a boy and a girl. And very late on in the novel, you learn that they have been having incestuous relationships. And you find out during the course of the novel that one of the characters is gay, and that he has had sex with some other characters in the book. And you find out all sorts of things about these characters, and some of it is interesting. Some of it was not very interesting to me. Some of it was just kind of like just endless details about these characters that I really didn't need to hear. So that is my biggest problem with it. It became, to me, it succumbed more to a kind of commercialism. Again, I mean, it had a plot, and there's nothing wrong with it having a plot, But the strengths of the plot also became the weaknesses. The strengths of this plot also became the weaknesses of the book. Now, another aspect of it that I wanted to talk about, I have so many notes. All of these kids in this group are very, very, they come across as being different, special than everyone else. They're classicists, they're kind of snobby, they're kind of elitist. They make lots of references to literature, to Latin, they quote Greek, they quote, literature. So they seem like elitists who are apart from the unwashed masses of society. But actually, they're actually very, very ordinary people, these 20-year-olds. To me, they're ordinary. Most of the book is just devoted to each of these characters being extremely paranoid about saving their asses, about not being found out for the crimes that they have committed. It's a perfectly ordinary thing. They become more and more paranoid. But there's nothing special about each character to me. They're not particularly deep, profound characters at all. Now this bacchanal, this Dionysian experience that they're all dying to have, and which ends in murder. Again, it's kind of unbelievable in a way that they would go to such lengths to achieve this bacchanalian experience, especially one group member, Henry. Why are they so intent on this? They're only 20 years old. What is their obsession with achieving this Dionysian experience? This hallucinogenic experience where they completely forget themselves and their own egos and duplicate the cult of Dionysius from 2,000 or more years ago. What is the motivating factor that makes them do this? I find this a little bit unbelievable. I mean, Donna Tartt doesn't really explain this in enough detail for me, make it credible enough. She says that Julian, their teacher, talked about the Bacchanalian experience, and he was very enthusiastic about it. It's mentioned in the book, and that's it. And then they just kind of are obsessed about it. Well, if they're so obsessed about achieving some kind of transcendental state, well, why don't they just drop some acid, take some LSD and some hash, or some peyote? Why go to these extreme lengths and they wear these sheets, these Greek sheets to duplicate the experience when they're out on their expeditions to try to duplicate the experience? Why go through all this? Why not just drop some acid? I was thinking to myself. Another thing about it is it sounds very typical. I mean, a lot of 20-year-old college kids, I know from personal experience, I'm sure you do too, there are a lot of 20-year-olds who haven't even begun to live life yet, and they want to drop acid, or they want to achieve some kind of transcendental experience. They want to have a shortcut to wisdom. They want to amass the wisdom that one would in 60 or 70 years in a day, by using drugs. This is very, very typical. This is very ordinary. There's nothing special about this to me. It's a very predictable way that 20-year-old snobbish elite students would act. So there's that also. Another thing that I find questionable about this book is that in a great work of literature, there's always some kind of culminating insight into the nature of life, into the nature of humanity, into the nature of existence, which is achieved by the main character. I mean, I think of Hamlet. His brain is squirming for the first 4 acts. of the play. But in the fifth act, he reaches some kind of an understanding. He sees life differently. He reaches a certain kind of peace. The same thing is true of Macbeth, even though Macbeth is not particularly happy about his insight. When he talks about tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, he sees life having transgressed, having done something which most human beings would not do, having stepped out of the bounds of society. Macbeth destroys himself, but at the same time, the payoff for him is that he's able to understand the sweep of life in a way that no ordinary person could. Captain Ahab, he certainly steps out of the social norms, and he is destroyed by it, but he understands something about the nature of the whale, about the nature of the universe, which is just titanic, which is monumental. John Cheever has this kind of understanding in his short stories. He's coming from a very visionary place. Witold Gombrowicz has this. I could give you many more examples. Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Thomas Hardy has a very, very profound understanding of the flawed nature of humanity. And you understand this by the end of the novel. In this novel, The Secret History, I didn't sense that there was any kind of transcendental understanding of the nature of life achieved by any of these characters. They spend most of their time just kind of squirming in paranoia that they're going to be found out for the murders that they've committed. They kind of fall to pieces. They drink a hell of a lot more and take drugs and are nervous wrecks. And there's a lot of infighting and arguing and subplots and so on in the soap opera. But I don't really get the sense that anyone, including the main character, Richard, achieves any sort of transcendental understanding. Richard is not very happy with life. I understand that. He's not happy about it. But I don't get that monumental sense of understanding. Again, this all takes a backseat to the great soap opera of the book, in a way. And I found that is the reason why it shifted from becoming a potentially great work of literature to merely a very well-written, at times enthralling, yarn. Another thing that I found questionable about this book, it's one of the strengths of the book, but to me it's also one of the weaknesses of the book, is that the observations that Richard, the main character, make, although are brilliant at times, don't seem to be credible, these observations he makes. And the way that he expresses himself, he expresses himself in a way which I don't believe any 20-year-old would. He seems like he's way more advanced than his 20 years. I mean, he just has these perceptions and insights which I don't believe are really his. I believe that they're just Donna Tartt's, using Richard as a mouthpiece. I sense Donna Tartt, the author, her presence, her ego, in this book. At times she becomes Richard. Richard is just a mouthpiece for her. So a lot of the perceptions and the way that Richard expresses himself, I do not find credible for a 20-year-old. He expresses himself the way that a mature 40 or 50 or 60-year-old artist would. He has at times exquisite sensitivity about everything. And I don't believe that's possible or very likely with a 20-year-old at all. Let me see if I can give you some examples. For instance, this will give you a flavor for the novel. Richard says at one point, he says, "Our shoes clicked across the ghastly wilderness of white linoleum," which is an absolutely wonderful description. No question about it. I'm not knocking that. But would a 20-year-old really express himself in this way? Donna Tartt would, but would a 20-year-old? At another point, Richard has lunch with his teacher, Julian, the Greek scholar. And Richard, and they're drinking some wine. Julian is treating him to some wine. And Richard says that the wine was a rich and almost maddeningly delicious bottle of Chateau Latour. Really? A 20-year-old is going to say that they're having a maddeningly delicious bottle of this wine? How the hell would he know? Has this 20-year-old, is he such a connoisseur of wine? He comes from a very bourgeois family, humble origins in California. Well, what has he been tibbling on wine for the first 19 years of his life? This is Donna Tartt speaking. This is not Richard speaking. Then there's another. And then he says, "I slept all day, face down in the pillow, a comfortable dead man's float, only remotely disturbed by a chill undertone of reality. Talk, footsteps, slamming doors, which threaded fitfully through the dark, blood-warm waters of dreams." This is how Richard expresses himself in his inner thoughts. Now again, this is absolutely beautifully written. I would like to write this way. But I can't believe that a 20-year-old would express himself in this way. To me, this is Donna Tartt showing off her wordsmithing skills. And again, I mean, you may. This is my own taste. I mean, you may love the fact that she does this. I certainly admire it. But she's not restraining herself. She's going whole hog, showing how well she can write, which is great. But Richard, her character would never say this. I'll just give you one more. There are so many. I mean, this is some book. He says at one point, he's walking across the campus he's on. He says, "The campus seemed deserted. Everyone was at the party, I supposed, and the green lawn, the gaudy tulips, were hushed and expectant beneath the overcast sky. Somewhere a shutter creaked. Above my head, in the wicked black claws of an elm, a marooned kite rattled convulsively, then was still. This is Kansas, I thought. This is Kansas before the cyclone hits." Well, again, this writing is absolutely brilliant. That's gorgeous. 20-year-old would never say this. A 20-year-old would never say, "In the wicked black claws of an elm, a marooned kite rattled." This is all Donna Tartt. So this is the author introducing her own ego into it, and the more she does this, the more I love her writing, but the less involved I am with the actual story, because I know this is just all her showing off. I'm not so involved with the story anymore. The story sacrifices, the credibility of the story sacrifices because of this luscious language she uses. And she does this all of the time. She has these gorgeous descriptions, these gorgeous similes. It's as if Donna Tartt had studied literature, great literature, and she really, really studied it. And she knows how to write a description. She knows, I wrote this now, she is doing the classic thing that all good writers should do, of endowing inanimate objects with seemingly human characteristics. For instance, she says, "the wicked claws of the elm tree." She's making it seem somehow human. or what else? What did I just quote? The green lawn. The gaudy tulips were hushed and expectant. Well, tulips are just inanimate objects, but she describes them as hushed and expectant. That's something that you would use to describe a human being. So by endowing something which is inanimate, an inanimate object with human characteristics, gives great color to your description. This is a classic device which all competent writers use, and she has learned her craft. She knows she should do it, and she does it all the time, all throughout the book. She's always giving descriptions like that. So even though the writing is brilliant, and like I say, she certainly knows how to write, a good description. She writes brilliant descriptions at times. Some are very good, some are brilliant. I get the feeling sometimes that Donna Tartt is on automatic pilot when she does this. She's saying, "Oh, now is the time for me to have another description," and then she'll go on, and then another description. She knows just when to put them, and in a way, they kind of lose their effect on me because she has so many of them. She kind of goes overboard with them. She's not selective about when to use these brilliant descriptions, to me. And after a while, they become somewhat monotonous. Here's another realization I came to. Whatever happens in the story, she describes everything. She describes everything. When they go to, you name it, they go to the funeral of this guy, Bunny. And then she describes Bunny's parents' house. She describes the shutters, I think, and the driveway. Every little thing in this book, she never fails to describe. It's like she's read in some textbook on writing. Remember, writer, when you write, give a lot of detail about everything so it comes to life. And boy, does she do this. She gives fucking details with everything. Too much. She's not selective about when she should have her details. And so after a while, for me, it becomes monotonous. There's so many brilliant passages like this that they become monotonous after a while. It's kind of like a person who is painting, and every square inch of the canvas that they're painting has this bright, brilliant color. Well, when you put bright, brilliant color on every square inch of a canvas, none of it is brilliant. All brilliance is no brilliance, because you don't have any neutral colors to offset it against. So you really can't appreciate that brilliance. Sometimes you just need one or two bright spots in a painting, and the rest of it neutral colors for that bright to really come out. It's the simplicity of it that's important, to make that bright, that reddish color or that bright color stand out. She doesn't know how to restrain herself. There's too much brilliance, too many of these lush descriptions. It's too incredulous that a 20-year-old would have such refined sensitivity. And so I admired the book very much as being she's a real technician, Donna Tartt, but at the same time I wasn't really wrapped up in the book precisely because of it. So her technical expertise also was kind of a pitfall in her particular case. And I don't know how to explain it exactly. I mean, Vladimir Nabokov says, to be a writer is to go into great details. And there's certainly a lot of details when you read Nabokov, right? And the same is true with Bellow. So Bellow is full of lush descriptions. He doesn't miss a trick either. Lots of detail about everything too. But for some reason, I just don't get this kind of frustration with this deluge of details, of brilliance, as I do with Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I just don't. So, one more, I can't resist myself. She's such a good writer. At one point also, Richard describes this. He says, "The sun came up suddenly behind a rain cloud, flooding the room with glorious light that wavered on the walls like water." This is what she does. This is shot through the whole book. This is Donna Tartt. This is not Richard speaking. So, I don't know, there are many, many other pitfalls I have. I don't want to be too picayune about it. So remember, you have to put this in a frame of reference. She's a hell of a good writer. I would say this. I would say that Donna Tartt is a very, very good writer, but she is squandering her talents on a bunch of kids that it wasn't worth doing it for. Her talents were, how shall I put it? She gets swept up in too much detail. The plot becomes way too convoluted. It becomes a lot too soap opera-y for me. I think this book could have been a lot shorter. It would have been a lot more powerful. It needed a lot of editing. Brilliant as she is, she needed to restrain herself and to take her own ego out of it a little bit more, to make the characters more credible. Just too long a book. It just kind of becomes a soap opera. Maybe this is part of its cult appeal. It's this kind of, all of the different hang-ups and facets of each of these characters. I could see how this could attract a cult following. But for me, it was a bit too much. So it kind of ultimately. So again, it's a matter of my individual taste. You have to put this in the right context. I found myself becoming, at times, alternately so impressed with her writing and so frustrated with her that she can't stop with this brilliance all the time. Tone it down a little bit. That's what I kept thinking. A lot of the time she was giving endless details about these characters that I just didn't care to hear. I didn't care that the brother and sister in this book, Charles and Camille, I didn't care that they had incestuous relationships. I didn't care about this drug dealer Cloak. I just didn't care about these guys, these characters. And I also didn't care about the fact that they're always drinking. I mean, these kids are like completely, they're always drinking and they're always taking drugs and they're 20 years old. Even before the murder was committed, they're like the murders are committed. They're always drinking. They can't cope without drinking or drugs. This is not a very interesting character to me when you have to rely on that. They're not very strong characters. Some of them are kind of sensitive characters. They're paranoid characters, but do they show great strength? These characters, are they unusual characters? No. I mean, this is part of the reason that I'm not crazy about a lot of Woody Allen's movies. I mean, Woody Allen is very, very good at depicting middle class, upper middle class, overly educated people who live very empty lives and basically have no talent. Okay, he's very good at exposing their basic ennui, but they're not particularly interesting characters. They're not very strong characters. They're kind of idle, spoiled characters who were educated at some college. Well, I kind of get that sense also from this book. Okay, so the book is about a bunch of kids who went to college. And they are kind of spoiled. I'm repeating myself. So that's it. So I think she kind of wasted her talents to a certain extent on the subject matter of this book, and she got way too swept up in the intricacies, the convoluted intricacies of the plot. Again, I mean, it's not an easy thing to have done what she did. I mean, to have this kind of convoluted plot, to go through all of the permutations that she did with each of these characters, I mean, each of the characters does have depth to them and has a richness to them. And to go through exploring them in detail, it was its strength as well as its weakness. It was too much at times. It was boring at times. It got monotonous at times. But at certain times, it was very interesting. So it was kind of a mixed bag for me. I know this is a very, very peculiar kind of review. I'm probably being too picky, Yoon. But that's it. You're not going to waste your time by reading this book at all. On the other hand, well, it had problems. So, that's it.